Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Shut the Front Door podcast. This is the Real Talk About Real Estate podcast. And with me again is Scott Connors.
Hey, Johnny. How's it going today?
Doing good. So we are currently live again on all of our social media platforms on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, you name it. Your comments should appear live on screen. Your reactions should as well. So give us a like, follow, and share. Don't forget to check us out on Spotify. But today, Scott, you brought another interesting topic based off of some recent experiences, all about building inspections. So I'll let you lead us off.
Yeah, home inspections. You know, one great thing about this business is you never run out of topics because we're out there in the field every day, and it's like every day something happens where we're like, hey, we should talk about this on the podcast. So, today's scenario is an interesting one. Had a house under contract, was my listing. Buyer did a home inspection, and for various reasons, they decided to walk away. And so the question is, what happens to that home inspection? Very frequently, we'll have a buyer reach out about a house. Maybe they're expressing some interest, and they'll ask us if there is an existing home inspection. And the answer is usually no, because sellers don't typically do a home inspection ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a little bit of a misperception among some buyers that it's common that a home inspection kind of is out there somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not usually the case. But what happens when it is? So our stance is, as real estate agents, we have an obligation to disclose everything we know about the properties we have listed. Sellers also have an obligation to disclose any defects of any properties that they're selling. And so once a home inspection has been done, we believe that every word of that inspection needs to be disclosed to any future buyers, because we now know all of these things about the house. And a lot of times it's things we didn't know ahead of time, right? Mm-hmm.
Right.
You see stuff all the time that your sellers didn't know and therefore didn't disclose. But now there's an inspection report out there that exists that does reveal some issues that are in existence.
Yeah, and you hit the key word. Disclosure is the absolute perfect term, because there is obligations that we, and not just, there's laws, right? I mean, we cannot conceal material fact against a potential buyer. If someone, if a seller came to me and said, hey, my basement leaks, but don't tell the buyer, I cannot do that.
Not a chance.
I cannot not inform the public of what they would call a material. Oh, what do we got here? Bethy, thank you for sharing the stream. Anyways, it's an absolute. So the question that I think that you're dealing with today is the inspections are somewhat considered private property in a way, because another buyer pays for it and it's their personal information. But now you as a seller's agent have a responsibility to at least inform the upcoming party, should there be another buyer interested, of any of the defects. And that's the conundrum, because is there such thing as passing or failing a building inspection?
Absolutely not. And that's another misconception, is that building inspections are never pass fail. It's simply, here's everything we discovered about the house you're thinking about buying. And so, in fact, a lot of things in the inspection report are just informational anyway. Mm-hmm. Hey, it looks like we're going to be putting a furnace in the next 3 to 5 years. Now, that's not disclosing that the furnace is broken. It's not. It works just fine. But in the inspector's opinion, this particular furnace has reached the end of its useful life, or is near the end of its expected lifespan. And so they're advising the buyer that they should plan on a furnace in the relatively near future. Just an example. Now, that's not something a seller would be required to disclose, you wouldn't think, because it's not defective.
Well, even let's just say the furnace was broken. Let's just say it's not producing heat for whatever reason. Let's just say it was completely out and it needed to be replaced. Even then, it's not failing an inspection. Most buyers would tend to want the furnace to work, 99.9% of the buyers. But what if you were an HVAC tech? What if you had the ability to have wholesale purchase priced furnaces in supply that you can fix this over the weekend for maybe a couple $1,000, but you can use that to manipulate the price, maybe $5,000 off, right, or more?
Yeah, for sure. I just had a sorry, it keeps dinging. I had a buyer just say to me last week, you can't sell a house if it doesn't have a working furnace. Well, of course you can.
You can sell a car without an engine.
You can sell anything you want to.
Yeah.
There's no requirement that a house has a working furnace. However, it's something that you as a buyer are going to want to be aware of course.
Right.
So to go back to the situation at hand, so we have a contract that was in place that fell apart. We have a home inspection that was done. I have a copy of it as the listing agent. The seller has a copy of it. Now we have a new buyer come along and go under contract on the home again. We believe strongly that we have an obligation to share that report with any prospective buyers. In fact, we put them on the MLS. So if an inspection's been done, it's out there and we're going to share it with everybody. Now, for the buyer, it's an important thing to know that we still recommend you do your own, right? And so what are the reasons they might do that, Johnny?
Well, I mean, it's to protect your own interest. One is if you're using a previous building inspection from someone else's, there really is no connection or responsibility from that previous building inspector. That basically, if there was something that was missed, you can't go back and say it was that, and you didn't hire that inspector. It was on behalf of the other party. But on top of that, it's your own personal look to make sure that it meets or exceeds your standard as a buyer. For the condition of the property. So to that effect, you can use anyone that you deem qualified, that you trust. We want to make sure that they at least have the proper knowledge or skill set to comment on what they're commenting on within their reports. But it's important to, trust but verify kind of situation. Use your own representation. Usually you're going to be much, much better off.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. I often tell buyers, even if the seller had a home inspection done, why would you trust it? Right? I mean, I know a lot of different home inspectors, and I know, just like we know different appraisers, it's in our market, in our area, it's most common for the buyers to pay for inspections, pay for appraisals, because you want your representative doing that, not the seller's representative. You want to know that they didn't hire their brother-in-law to do a home inspection, and maybe they didn't really disclose everything.
Right.
So it's in the buyer's interest to hire their own home inspector anyway. But you nailed it when you said that they have no recourse against that previous inspector. And man, is that important. When someone does buy a home and unfortunately finds out there's a problem they weren't aware of, we get that call every once in a while, a month after closing. Hey, I moved in and this, there's a crack in the foundation we didn't know about, or the furnace isn't working, whatever the issue is.
Right.
Well, my first question always is, did you call your inspector? Because you hired that inspector to find these kinds of issues. And if they didn't, that's your first call. Well, if you use a previous home inspection, you don't get to make that call because that inspector has no liability to you. So that's a really important reason why even when there is a previous inspection, you should, as a buyer, have your own done. The second thing is, we always recommend, so I get the question all the time, who do you recommend? Who do you recommend to do my home inspection? And I absolutely will never answer that question. I do not recommend home inspectors. We will give you a list. We encourage you to call them, talk to them, look at their resumes, look at their qualifications, talk about what they charge you. Then you decide who you feel most comfortable with to do your inspection.
Right.
If you are just using a previous inspection report, you didn't go through that process. And so you don't know that you got the most qualified inspector or the one who was going to focus on the items you were most concerned with. And so yet another reason why we, even with the presence of a previous inspection, you should hire your own inspector to go out there and do it.
Well, and not even just that, but things change. Even if it's a daily change.
Absolutely.
A broken pipe in the house doesn't have to, just because something happened during an inspection, that was, let's just say, was functional a week ago, does not mean that it's functioning today the same way. Now, obviously, like major defects, if there was a broken supply line and water was dripping through the ceiling, okay, we can visually see that. But even something as simple as like, a slow leak or anything,
sure,
things can change.
You have a vacant house that's been sitting empty for a couple months. You have a water line break. You have one of those very slow trickles that didn't appear for the first inspection, and now it does.
A small crack in the glass that was missed is now the broken window. It just based off a temperature differential. All these things can change. So again, hiring your own personal representation, even if you use the same inspector that was there previously that has existing knowledge on the property, giving them a second look. I mean, it never hurts, and therefore at that point, you're kind of piggybacking off of that insurance that their bonding as far as at least you're represented. You're fully represented because you've paid them for a service.
And you have recourse. And man, that recourse is so important. We hate whenever we get that occasional call from someone who bought a home and it turns out it wasn't quite what they expected, or there are problems they weren't anticipating. Man, we hate getting those calls. Unfortunately, we rarely can do anything about it because if the seller didn't disclose it, we didn't really know that was an issue either. But you hired a professional to check it out for you, man. That's who you're going to call. And, those guys have insurance. They've got some of them have warranty coverage.
Right.
We've got some really good inspectors in the area, and using one of them that you're paying for is really important. So we strongly, strongly encourage that, even when we have a fairly recent home inspection in existence.
Yeah, and you mentioned a good point, not recommending a particular, inspector. And I will make a recommendation not about who to use. I will say who not to use. And this is the time where father-in-laws and, uncles and everyone else, you could take them through the property. They can certainly give you your opinion, but this is the time to have an unbiased, and I cannot stress that enough, an unbiased point of view, because family members, dealing with this for so long, they want to protect your interest. And I get it. I would want to do the same for my family. However, sometimes they lend on the extreme end of you're not getting a good view because they are so aligned with wanting to protect you. Sometimes they can overprotect you and actually causing you more damage than if you would have had an unbiased party.
Yeah, absolutely. The main reason I don't want to recommend an inspector, I think it's fairly obvious, at least to us it is, maybe not to the general public. But, we do a fair amount of business. And I would say that if I gave all of my buyers, or if I gave a recommendation to one inspector to all of my clients, that inspector would really like me and really like getting my business and may not be willing to cause problems in my deals by finding defects because he wants to make sure that that business keeps flowing. And even if that's not the case, I never even want it to look like that. I would say I would hate the idea that I run into you at Walmart 6 months down the road and you say, well, you had your buddy the inspector and I know you two are working together. And so I'm sure that he didn't really do what he should have done. We're just not going to put ourselves in that position. We want to make sure that people are very, very comfortable with what they're buying once they get to a closing table.
What you see is all there is.
That's exactly right. So, hey, it's Monday. Just to change subjects a little bit, Monday, which means that the Connors Group newsletter is about to hit a couple thousand inboxes out there. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter, I'm going to encourage you, shoot us a message, jump on our website, which is ohiovalley.realestate. Sign up for the newsletter. And what we do in there, a couple of interesting things. We feature listings, talk about what's going on with our team. But the real key is you will see listings before they exist anywhere else, anywhere. We preview all of our listings 24 hours before they hit the MLS, which means they're not on the website, it's not on Realtor.com. Our folks in our newsletter database get the inside track on those, and it's a pretty cool feature that we're doing there.
It's an absolute necessity in a hot market.
It sure is. So you want to be first in the door. Make sure you sign up for that newsletter.
Perfect plug.
All right.
Anything else we got for today's?
I'm good to go. Hope everyone's having a good Monday. It's rainy out here, but we'll stay dry and keep selling real estate.
Yep, stay tuned. And again, if you haven't followed us on Spotify, give us a like, follow, share. It's the best way that you can help support small business. And as always, we'll see you next week.
Take care.